Hello and welcome. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that this conversation will be conducted in both Arabic and English with two speakers each. Live interpretation is available for English speakers by clicking more at the bottom of the screen and then on the globe icon. We also wanted to let you know that the session will be recorded for education and research purposes and may be transcribed, translated, and shared at a later time. I would like to start off by introducing our moderator. Dr. Natalie El-Eid is the American Druze Foundation Postdoctoral Fellow at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. She is an elected member at large on the executive board of the Arab American Studies Association, co-chair of the Activism Caucus of the American Studies Association, and a working member of the Human Rights Committee of the Association for Middle East Women's Studies. Dr. Natalie's research and expertise focus on transnational Levantine Druze communities, namely in Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine, at the nexus of their ethno-religious beliefs and contemporary lived experiences. In her current book project titled Druze Afterlives, Between Bodies and Borders, Dr. El-Eid examines Druze reincarnation narratives in relation to what she frames as the ongoing Lebanese civil war. And in doing so, Dr. El-Eid introduces the concept of Druze afterlives to provide a new way of understanding how empire, war, trauma, memory, and gender intersect within and across the borders, bodies, and stories of the transnational Arab world. For this research, she was recently named the 2025-2026 Centennial Postdoctoral Fellow in the study of the Arab world by the American Council of Learned Societies. And for outstanding academic research and community engagement, she was also recently recognized by the Arab American Foundation as one of the 40 under 40 accomplished Arab Americans 2025 cohort. We thank her very, very much for moderating this process and this conversation. And Natalie, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Nadine. And thank you all so much for being here. Before beginning this important discussion today, and hearing from these incredible anti-Zionist Druze voices from Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Canada, and the US, I would like to say that the roots of this conversation are truly everywhere. Just for this event today, we have had registrants from all of the countries I just named, as well as registrants from Australia, France, Israel, Spain, Russia, Taiwan, Denmark, the Netherlands, Ireland, the United Kingdom, Italy, Tunisia, Dubai, Jordan, and Germany. And that's even when I last checked, which was last night. So welcome to you all. We truly are a transnational and global community, and such warrants a transnational and interconnected conversation. So, who are we, the speakers that you are listening to today? We define ourselves as a collective of Druze secular and non-sectarian activists, scholars, researchers, and community organizers from around the world with roots in the Levant. I would like to start off by introducing Maisan. Born in Asfiya village, Makarem, Palestine, Maisan is a writer, cook, and activist. She studied media and communications at Yazghayil College and Arabic Language and Literature and East Asian Studies at the University of Haifa. A co-founder and project of Urfud, Refuse, Your People Will Protect You, a movement against the compulsory military service for Palestinian Druze youth. She is engaged in writing articles and literary texts, which includes documentation and recording. She worked as a coach at Ahl Foundation for Community Organizing and accompanied many political and social campaigns in Palestine. Based in Berlin since 2017, she has worked as an artistic mediator in the German Pavilion at the Venice Biennial and is a co-founder and organizer of SOAT Festival in Berlin. She worked as an artist liaison at Mufradat organization. Her writings appear in Asafir, Fusha, Jim, Khat 30, Qahal, Qadita, Rasif 22, Roman, and the Marcus Review. Welcome, Maisan.
شكرا ناتالي.
And thank you. And next we have Mervit. Mervit is a mother of two, currently living in Canada and originally from Lebanon. Mervit's recent focus has been her graduate research on identity formation and the positive and negative experiences of Middle Eastern diaspora communities in the West. A significant part of this work centers not only on the Druze people in the diaspora, but also on Levantine communities more broadly, and the experience of existing between spaces, particularly the space of rejecting Zionist ideologies. Mervit is specifically interested in how culture, art, land-based and spiritual-based tools can support our people's reclamation of identity and belonging. She hopes to eventually develop this research into a book that can serve as a resource for others. Thank you for being here, Mervit.
Thank you.
Next, we have Nadine. Based between Beirut and Mount Lebanon, Nadine is a writer who has worked in development, fundraising, and project management with different international and regional agencies for over 10 years. She holds an MA in International Politics and Diplomacy from the SOAS University in London, where she also worked as an independent reporter with an international news agency. She is currently the manager of a global education program that supports Palestinian students and medical residents in pursuing university degrees and fellowships around the world. Nadine resorts to the written word for personal and political expression, exploration, and defiance, and is published against various journals in Lebanon and abroad. Over the years, she has been involved with different community-led initiatives that attempt to fill essential gaps towards better prospects for accountability, justice, and equal access. Thank you for being here, Nadine.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Ebaa. Ebaa, going under her stage name Annie, born in 1993, is a Palestinian Syrian-born and based rapper, songwriter, and performer who also has an MA degree in performance art. Ebaa started making theater performance in the summer of 2017 and released her first official project in 2020 in collaboration with the producer Moody under the title Mansi. And her years of activity, Ebaa has built a reputation as an artist that has multi-influences and can dig into any type of hip-hop, experimenting in EDM rap, rap rock, lo-fi, and many more, and mixing it with traditional folk songs and music in alternative, abstract, experimental style. Ebaa has released a count of more than 25 audiovisual artistic works, going from singles to EPs, reaching up to thousands of streams of local and regional audiences, featuring and being featured in many major artists' projects. Thank you to you, Ebaa, for being here as well. And thank you to all of our esteemed panelists for joining in on this important conversation. I want to start by talking a little bit about our mission here. And this collective of anti-Zionist voices from within the transnational Druze community, we hope to offer alternative narratives to what we are seeing in online, such as social media, news outlets, spaces, academic spaces, and offline spaces within and beyond our Druze communities regarding Druze histories, contemporary realities, and points of views across our homelands and diasporas in relation to Zionism. Why do we want to do this? In this era of increasing precarity, we aim to challenge Zionist ideologies that are erroneously applied in general definition or description of our peoples, forge space for those Druze who feel they have not had a voice in these conversations, as well as inspire and inform non-Druze communities who may misunderstand, misrepresent, or simply have no access to our diverse Druze perspectives and experiences. In terms of our audience today, this is a public discussion open to all. We encourage audience members to post any thoughts or questions in the chat on Zoom. With that, we do hope that you each participate with good intention, allyship, and/or curiosity to learn more. Before we go into our general discussion, I want to talk about our overall collective purpose. So our liberation framework is inherently anti-oppressive, decolonial, transnational, and feminist. We strive to remain deeply focused on the overarching goals and themes that have brought us together, to challenge and shift dominant narratives, especially those co-opted by Zionist frameworks that erase, marginalize, or misrepresent our people. Some of the goals and themes you'll hear in the conversation today, as well as across our work and as we continue to move this community space forward, is centering the interconnection of the region, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, cultivating remembrance, particularly of histories and experiences that have been violently and actively and ongoingly erased. Uplift local and regional anti-colonial, anti-Zionist, and liberation-centered narratives, as well as reclaim and share our stories through lived experience, scholarship, and activism. So that is a brief introduction of who we are and why we are here today. Before we move into hearing from our panelists individually, I'd like to invite Nadine to briefly contextualize our conversation in terms of history and experiences.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, friends on the panel, and thank you to everybody who joined. So I think it's important to begin with a brief and broad historical and contextual overview that will kind of explain why we are having this conversation and why we are having it at this specific point in time. Within modern history, Druze communities have repeatedly been treated less as political subjects and more as strategic assets, as minorities whose actions are interpreted for other political purposes. What that has resulted in over many years is that many of these communities have been subject to difficult conditions, from ostracization to security threats, contested citizenship or status, as well as internal factions that have further exacerbated and deepened their struggle and uniformity. Non-uniformity. So Druze political positions have not been produced in abstraction. They have always and continue to be shaped by political dynamics and structures that have come to be instrumentalized. And this specific instrumentalization has often been presented through security bargains. As many people comment often, we protect you if you align with us. This instrumentalization has also been presented in the form of exceptionalism. So basically being a model or a loyal minority within different contexts. So within the specific context that we are addressing here in this conversation, specifically in light of the ongoing Zionist genocide of the Palestinian people, and within the framework of an anti-Zionist stance and value system, there are a few historical elements that I think need to be clarified. It's also important to note here that the information shared now and throughout this discussion can be sourced and corroborated, and noting that everything we're going to say is a broad overview, although the historical details in and of themselves are very important. And we have a plan to maybe address these during another panel or even through a published paper. Just very briefly, the origins of the struggle within this specific context was in fact 1948 as well. Palestinian nationalist elements within the Druze communities saw themselves as Palestinian Arabs and fought against co-option, while in parallel, the Druze of Lebanon and Syria also sided with the Arab movements against the Zionists. However, with the Arab defeat in 1948, the strategic importance or role of Druze from the perspective of the Zionist colonizers became more important because cooperation with them could be instrumentalized, as we said before. And the main purposes for this instrumentalization, and I will quote here directly from a book by Qais Ferro titled The Druze in the Jewish State, A Brief History, published in 1999. It's an excellent book. But basically, the goal of the Zionist force at this point was to alienate the Druze from the other Arab communities in the new state and vice versa. So this kind of rhetoric of the good Arabs versus the bad Arabs that we hear very often in this dialogue, as well as to influence relations with the Druze of Syria, who also proved very strategic. And then there's a lot of scholars and writers that talk about showcasing through their benevolence with the Druze community this kind of benevolent attitude that the newly created state was willing to adopt towards non-hostile minorities. So essentially, the Druze fought Zionism in 1948 and later succumbed to the Zionist state as the only viable choice to survive in the land of their ancestors. And this will be further touched upon later by Maisan and by other speakers in a bit more detail. Just tying it all together as why does this matter now and why are we talking about it now? Primarily in light of the massacres that took place in Sweida, that are taking place in Sweida, and the way in which the Zionist entity swooped in under the guise of, again, preventing harm, protecting, brings back, or actually kind of resheds light on this phenomena of strategic use of minorities and more broadly, the usefulness of segregation among the Arabs, not just among the Druze, in order to further the Zionist political agenda. The role of the Zionist entity in regional fragmentation means that these kind of protection narratives and sectarian self-defense logic that we've been hearing kind of rise again lately is very impactful in light of volatile conditions and volatile state authorities. This all means that once again and repeatedly, the Druze communities are being spoken for and on behalf of in terms of what benefits them. And I think it's important to say that the added factor here is the kind of lack of effective transnational Druze alignment and organizing, both on a higher political level that we have nothing to do with, unfortunately, in some countries, but also at the level of youth and activists and community representatives. So just to sum up this introduction before I pass on the conversation, this conversation matters now because the looming geopolitical threats that are too numerous to list at this point really present fertile grounds for turning minorities into pawns once again. The local premises in each country are vastly complicated, and this is something that has to be taken into consideration throughout the duration of this conversation. But the main intention is to resist flattening our Druze politics specifically into tools for political expansionist, colonialist, Zionist agendas, and to reimagine, rediscuss, rethink ways that we can keep agency, risk, ways to resolve internal strife and our own reconciliation at the center of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadine, for that important overview and contextualization, a bit of the history of what led us to this current moment. I'd like to turn it over to Maisan now, who will be speaking about the contemporary experiences and a bit of the history of the Druze in Palestine.
شكرا ناتالي شكرا نادين يمكن فرصة
Thank you,
بس
Nadine. Thank
نذكر
you,
الناس
Natalie.
إنه
I would like to
في
remind people
ترجمة
that
فورية
interpretation is available because I will
لأن
be
أنا
speaking
رح
in
أحكي
Arabic.
بالعربي فللناس اللي أو for those who want to listen in English, we have an interpretation option, so you can click on the global icon and listen to me in English.
I will start from where Nadine ended or stopped. And this way I will try to give you some historical facts about historical moments. When we talk about the narrative of the Druze of Palestine, maybe there are some prejudice or misinformation regarding this narrative, specifically regarding the historical
فأنا بدي أبدأ من نقطة تاريخية
moments. I will start before 1948. The Druze are part of the Palestinian society, the Palestinian culture, history, language, all aspects related to this place before 1948 and after 1948. And the Druze were as well part of a resistance movement against the occupation and the Zionist movement. And as Nadine mentioned, it's not only the Druze of Palestine, but also the Druze of Lebanon and of Syria who participated in combats. Unfortunately, many of them were actually hidden even from us. For example, some I want to tell you that some people might discover new information today because this narrative has been hidden, and unfortunately, those are the real landowners because of the systematic politics of the Zionist movement.
وهذا الإشي اللي أنا راح أوضحه.
I will clarify that. A lot of combats such as the Hosn Kasayr, you know, are still actually stand there for the martyrs who fell in 1948. And the information is really gone over very quickly. Even if there's a big historical text that reminds us of that, but a lot of people choose to forget that. What we sometimes also forget is that the policies of the Zionist movement and gangs after the occupation of and expelling people and killing people, they have really abused the Palestinians. And one of those policies was also aiming to divide or separate the Druze from the rest of the Palestinian people in order to fragment the people and to make it easier to rule when people are put up against each other. So if we look at all those policies, we see that nothing happened by chance. In the 50s, the Druze were defined as a national minority. That is actually what this definition is based on, the occupation of another population and occupation of a land and on the division of the people into nationalities in order to rule them. Well, I want to tell you that our religion is Druze and our nationality is Druze. I'm not sure if this exists elsewhere. This is the first systematic step. That is a state based on the occupation that defines a national minority and that separates them in the law and in the definitions of the law in the Palestinian and even Arab context. After this step, in the year 1956, on the one hand, the expropriation and confiscation of land started. Of course, the principle of an occupation state is based on expansion. That is to confiscate the lands of the people and to put other people to live there or to start projects or to create parks or build parks in the spaces where other people could be living. Consequently, the confiscation of land started, and by the way, among the Druze villages in general, more than 80% of their land. So Druze in Palestine and other places were farmers, and their main livelihood source was land. So those policies that came to actually to take their lands took also, or confiscate the land took also their livelihoods. So there was no way for those people to go into the land to work. On the other hand, I would like to talk about conscription or compulsory military service that was forced on in 56 on the Druze and later on in 58 on the Sharkas. And
كانت عبارة عن استثناء.
From 1948, the occupation state said that anybody who had the Israeli nationality was obliged to serve compulsory military service. And then in the next 3 years, all Palestinians, except for the Druze in 1956, and the Sharkas or Circassians were excluded actually from the conscription. What does it mean? I always ask myself about this narrative that is generalized on the Druze. Well, actually, this narrative says that they asked to join military service. Or even religious leaders are the ones who signed to agree on Druze compulsory military service or conscription. I ask myself, how can an occupation state agree with a group to oblige them for compulsory military service? Or maybe does it agree with this group to do that and then the people sign, or does it force it to do that? And according to the new Kaisper book, which is called Druze in the history,
بحث في أرشيف دولة الاحتلال
researched in the archives of the occupation and found that there was no document at all regarding any agreement between the religious leaders and the state about Druze conscription. However, he found a lot of diverse documents and in different years refusing conscription. People manifested against conscription and protested against it and were persecuted because of that, and they were imprisoned because of that as well. And consequently, I consider, and facts actually prove that conscription was not asked for, and I don't think that it is reasonable or logical for anybody to ask for it. The occupation state started a unit of the minority, it's called the minority unit, even before forcing the Druze on conscription. And the Palestinian society, of course, includes a minority that volunteered, of course, in this unit of minority. But nobody can or has the right to generalize that if somebody from a specific group decided to volunteer in the defense forces or in the occupation forces, actually. In the 70s, well, I want to continue talking about the policies. The local councils, the Druze local councils, were separated from the Arab ones. Consequently, today in the Palestinian society, there's something that is called the follow-up committee that includes the local councils, the Arab local councils, and the Druze. Well, the Druze local councils are not part of it. So how do they deal with the utilities or authorities in the villages? Actually, they have been separated from the Arab councils, local councils. And what's more important for me is that something that people always forget, which is the separation of educational curricula. That is, there are committees that were formed specifically in order to create a specific educational curriculum in Palestine that is totally separated from the ones or the curricula in Arab towns, used in Arab towns. I studied in my village, and our books were titled Arabic Language for Druze, Mathematics for Druze, History for Druze. And later on, according to the research of Dr. Rabah Halabi, I found out that
اللي
and
تمت
those
يعني
committees,
قصدا حتى
even they
مكتوب
did
ليش
intentionally, and even it was written why
اللجان هاي
those
عم تقع
committees
من
were
أجل
established,
فصل
and the
الدروز
objective was to
عن
separate the
باقي
Druze from the rest of the
الشعب
Palestinian
الفلسطيني
people. And
حتى
even there
خصصوا
was
درس اسمه
a
تراث
book about or a class about
هو
heritage,
أنا
and for
بالنسبة
me it
لي
is
أكثر كلمة فلسطينية
a very
هي تراث
Palestinian
شو
word.
يعني
What does
كيف
it
تنزعوا
mean
ناس
that
عن
you take
تراثهم
away people
الأصلي
from their real heritage?
وتستبدلوا
And
الفحوى أو
how can
المحتوى
you
تبع
put
كتب التراث
in
في معلومات
heritage books information that is not
لا
related
تمت
at all to
للتراث
heritage? For
بصدق
example,
يعني
they would
بيعلمونا
make a
عن
study about
شخصيات درزية
Lebanese or Syrian
لبنانية
Druze
أو
figures
سورية
or religious
بيعلمونا
leaders,
عن
but
مشايخ بس
okay,
هذا
this is general information that
أوكي
I'm learning
هذا هي
about
معلومات
some
عامة
people,
أنا عم
but
بتعلمها
they're not
بشخصيات
teaching me
ولكن ما
about
بيعلموني أنا
my
انتمائي
belonging.
إنما
They are
بيطمسوا
trying to
انتمائي
erase
شوي
my
وشوي
belonging or my
مع
affiliation. And
مع
then
الوقت
with
كمان
time,
صاروا يدخلوا الجيش على
the soldiers
المدارس
started to
يعني
come
أنا
to schools.
بتذكر في
That is, I
الثانوية كنت
remember
أشوف
that there were
جنود
soldiers who used to come to schools,
بيتفتلوا في
and they
المدرسة
used to hold
بيعملوا ورشات
workshops for the youth
تحضيرية
to prepare
للشباب
them for the
التحضير في
period
المدارس
after
هو إنه
school.
بعد
That is,
المدرسة
the youth
الشباب
would not
ما
go
بيروحوا
to,
على
whereby the youth
الجامعة
would not go to
بيروحوا على
university,
الجيش
they would
في
go
3
rather
سنين
to the
لأنه غير
military.
مجبرين
I'm talking about the
والنساء
men.
غير مجبرات
Well,
المتدينين كمان غير مجبرين
and as I
بالمعلومات
said,
العامة
over
وزي ما
the
حكيت على
years,
مدار السنين قامت
several
حركات كتير
movements
كبيرة
raised
ضد
against
آه،
conscription.
التجنيد الإجباري
And
ومع
for example,
إسقاطه
they were
أو مع
fighting
جعله اختياري
to
بذكر مثلا
annul it or to make it
لجنة المبادرة
optional.
العربية الدرزية اللي
And
هي قائمة لليوم
I
اللي أسسها
would like to
الشاعر سميح
mention
القاسم
Druze movement that
ورفاقه
is and other movements
وحركات
that
تانية
were
كثيرة
established in this
راح
regard.
أحكي
And
باختصار شديد
since I am
بما إني
coordinating
بنسق
the
حراك أرفض شعبك
Orfud
يحميك
movement, your people
حراك
protect you,
أرفض إجا
I would like to say that this movement was established to complement other
الحراكات القائمة
movements
ضد
against
التجنيد
conscription. And maybe
يمكن
what's different about
اللي
us is
غير
the
حلو
difference
إنه
about us is
حراك
that
شبابي
we are
بيآمن
made of
بقيم
youth and we
نسوية
promote,
حرية
we
وكل
advocate
القيادة
feminism
المشتركة
and
بين
and
الشباب
the
صبايا
life between
الحراك
men and
فلسطيني
young men
آمن
and
إنه قضية
women. And we
التجنيد
believe
الإجباري هي
that
قضية
our
جزء
cause
من
is
القضية
part of the
الفلسطينية الأوسع
broader
مش
Palestinian
منطق
cause.
إنه
We
نرفض
don't
التجنيد
refuse
كدروز
the conscription
إحنا
as
بنرفض
Druze, but we
التجنيد
refuse it
كفلسطينيين
as
و...
Palestinians.
وزي ما أنا
And
علمت إني أنا فلسطينية أو
as I went through a long
مرقت
path
مسار طويل
to
اللي
know
أعرف
who
أنا
I was,
مين
and that
بسبب كل
because
هاي
of all
السياسات
those policies
الساهرة
that try
إنه
to change
تغير
our identity,
هويتنا عنا
and I
كمان
would
بتوقع
consequently also
كل
expect from the
الفلسطينيين
Palestinians to
إنه
consider that conscription
يعتبروا التجنيد
is
الإجباري
part
جزء
of
من
the broader
القضية
Palestinian
الفلسطينية
cause, and
الأوسع
resisting it is
ومقاومته هي
a
شأن عام فلسطيني
general
عام
or
مش
a
شأن
public
اليهود
matter.
الخاص أرفض
And
فيها
we
خط
also have a
داعم
support
اللي
line,
فيه
including
محامين
lawyers and
وعم
social
نعمل
workers,
اجتماع وعملات اجتماع اللي بنقدم
through
فيه
which we actually
مرافقة قانونية ومعنوية لرافضي التجنيد
provide
الإجباري استشارة
counseling
وزيارات
regarding
في السجن
conscription. And
ومنآمن
any
إنه كل
person
شخص
has
عنده
the
الحرية
right
إنه يختار
to
ما
choose
يكون
and not to be
مرضي في
obliged
الآلة
to be part of
اللي
this
عم
mechanism
تقمع
that is
شعبنا
oppressing the Palestinian
الفلسطيني
people since
من
1948 and even before and until
1948
today,
و48
and
لليوم واللي
who's
عم تدمر
destroying
مناطق أخرى في
regions in the
الشرق
Middle East
الأوسط
in front of our
قدام
eyes.
عيننا
And I would like to conclude by
آخر
saying
شغلة بدي أنهي
that
فيها هي الأفكار المسبقة
a
اللي
prejudice about
تنحكى عن دروز
Palestine or
فلسطين إنهم
preconceptions
عايشين
about
في أكبر نعمة إنه هن عايشين
there are
في إسرائيل
actually preconceptions
عندهم
about the Palestinians
حقوق
who live in Israel
وعندهم
because people say that they have rights and
يعني عايشين حياة سعيدة.
happy life.
بعطي
And
مثال عن قرية عسفية.
for
قرية
example,
عسفية
the village of
75%
Asifi,
من أراضيها
who had 75%
تمت
of its
مصادرتها.
land confiscated and 50% of the houses do not have permits. So at any moment, there might demolition orders might be issued for those homes, and more than 200 homes are not connected to the electricity grid or power grid. So we're talking about the occupation state who actually built a military cemetery there, and it may expand it because for them any Palestinian has has value when they are dead more than higher value when they're dead than when they're alive. And this state always issues discriminatory laws against the Palestinians, even if the Palestinians have actually served in their military service. So the principle is that this is a state for Jewish people, like a law that says that this the state is for the Jewish and all other people are second-class people. And there are laws that also prohibit the Palestinians to sell their agricultural lands and to buy a small land on which they can build something. Or most of the time, they are not able to build on their lands, and consequently the villages grow upward and they do not have a place to live. I would like to thank everyone for coming to this session. I would like to ask Natalie, Mervit, Natalie and Ebaa and the interpreters and anyone who has worked for this seminar. And I would like to say that it's important for us to ask ourselves who is writing the narratives, and it's important not to be receivers only, because our similarities, the similarities between us are much bigger and more important from the gaps that this cancer is trying to build and expand among us. Thank you.
يعطيك ألف عافية Maisan. Thank you so much for your words, for your perspective, for your brilliance, for your dedication to our people, to our cause. It's what you said is so powerful, and I'm looking forward to connecting it in relation to the testimonies of everyone else we have here today. Next, we're going to move to Ebaa, who is going to be speaking about the contemporary experiences and histories of the Druze in Syria.
أنا رح كمل شو قالت مايسان ونسمع نفس القصة.
I will continue what Maisan has said and will tell you what happened in Julan when Israel occupied in 1976. 70% of the population were kicked out of the Julan. That is, and there was racial cleansing, and 70% of the population were displaced in 3 months, and all geographical or most the villages were wiped out, and only 4 villages that were Druze villages were remained. And the question was why, although they were living in the Golan and they were living in harmony with the others, and Majd al-Shams alone was set to fire 4 times during the Great Revolution in Syria, and people were used to hide their sheep. And in our village there was a church, and we were living in harmony. And as Maisa said, we are a part of the Syrian fabric, and we are still, and only these 4 villages remained because Israel had the plans to create the Syrian Druze country, and those who were against this plan was Jumblat in Lebanon and the Druze in Syria. In 1971, Israel promulgated the decision of joining the Golan, and the Druze in Julan were opposed the decision. And in 1982 February, this decision of was abolished quickly. I'm trying just to show you what Israel is doing or has been doing with the Druze since the occupation. In fact, Israel is only wants to convince this community that they are not Arab, that they are Druze. In the 70s, they separated the local councils and they imposed the Druze curriculum. And I was living there, so we used to learn about the Israel heroes at school, and we used to go to home, and then my parents told me that we are Syrians and we are from the Syrian fabric. And after 81, the folks of the Golan conducted activities because they saw how the curricula in schools was separated and wanted to say that we are part of this society and we are an integral part of this community. And it's not about nationalism. My nationality is not Druze. So here I'm asking, why do we have a sheikh on who is a chief of the military just to convince people that you should answer the sheikh because he's a sheikh, he's a Druze sheikh, he's a religious sheikh, and they forget about the religion. So they don't talk about religion, but they instrumentalize religion. In 1981, we had the Asham camp or summer camp where we learned about the names of the villages of the deported. We used also to celebrate the Jala, the independence, because we participated in the two revolutions against the French occupation or mandate. And then we moved to 2024. Before that, there were conflicts. When people opposed the decision, we had women who fell victims and men and children and whose names were placed in the Ashams Square in our town. And in 2024, 12 children's names were added to this list. Israel opened barracks in the courtyard where children played. I ask myself, can this happen in an Israeli town or village? This cannot happen. The soldiers themselves, the Israeli soldiers, when in 24 the shell fell in the courtyard where the children were playing. In fact, the Israelis came and took the parts. So we've been fighting for our homeland, and we were deceived, and especially in Syria, whereby our homeland is now in control in the hand of a Daesh previous warlord. And all the struggle that was done was thrown away, was thrown in the bin. So all our struggles for decades was thrown away because everybody nobody knows in Syria what Golan is, or and both parties, the Israelis and the Syrians, do not talk about the Golan, and the Israelis hid the plans, the maps of the Golan, and in the past they used to come and say, you want to stay here? Okay, fine, if not you can leave. And they erased all ruins, they just wiped out all heritage. And some came and asked people about the villages, this and that village, and the truth was erased. And today, who is writing the narrative? Israel is writing the narrative. And I go to a school where I learn about the Druze nationalism. However, this can't work like this, because let me tell you, if they treat us as a class 1 citizen, it's okay, but they are focusing on the nationalist law. So if you are not Jewish, you don't have rights. And we have the right the Israelis have the right to 5 cups of water, whereby we Druze or the Palestinians have the right to 1 glass of water. So this in addition to displacement and other issues, we are faced by these narratives that are erasing our narratives. So we know that lands are being appropriated and people are not given authorizations to construct. They are imposed very high fees. So everybody says, the narrative says that Israel is protecting us. And at the end of the day, ultimately, we say that we are Arabs. And the change has been very fast. And however, the plans were put in 1976. And after the Suwaida events, people were afraid, and they said, if Israel does not protect us, who will protect us? And today, in order to regain our narratives and then remind us who are we, what we did, and what will happen to or what awaits us. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and this space, and we hope to always remember that we are Arabs. Please. Thank you.
يعطيكي ألف عافية Ebaa, and thank you so much for pointing to and underscoring I hope you're all seeing these important patterns that are coming out in these stories. So the idea of Druze particularism, as stated by Qais Farrow and other scholars, the idea of Druze separation, the appropriation of not just Druze lands, but also of Druze narratives, Druze heritages, this insistence of removal and identity crisis to which many people within Druze homelands and across Druze diasporas don't know what it means to be Druze or relate to a Druze identity that has been co-opted, and deliberately so, given our minority status. Now I would like to move to Nadine, who will be talking about the Druze in Lebanon.
Thank you Natalie وشكرا كتير ميسان وإباء يعني صرنا حكيين نفس الحديث.
Thank you Maisan and Ebaa. We've been talking about this topic, but now we're learning new things.
Is that the Druze in Lebanon are not required in the same way to play a role directly in supporting the Zionist project, but rather it's the pressure that's being placed on the country as a whole through the political pressure towards normalization. Historically speaking, there is a very vast history of alignment with the Palestinian struggle among the Druze community, with the central actor being Kamal Jumblat. As of the late 1960s, the PSP was explicitly pro-Palestinian, allied with the PLO, and part of the Lebanese movement, which in fact viewed the Palestinian arms presence as a legitimate anti-colonial struggle, a counterweight to the kind of Lebanese sectarian conservatism that was bubbling, and a revolutionary ally against imperialism and Zionism. Today, what I think is important to discuss and to think about in terms of Lebanon is within our role and within our stance in terms of anti-Zionism. How can this be exercised without remaining within the confines of the existing traditional forms of leadership? There is this reality here which kind of renders any ideology or value-based stance of a certain community rather difficult, because it often ends up aligning with or against political factions. And I guess that this is applicable to the country as a whole. And so the question being at the moment, and what I always try to bring up within Druze communities, within family members, within elders who have kind of this mixed memory of different impressions, of different conversations on this topic, is just how to bring this to kind of the realistic political context, and how it can be more vibrant in its existence, the anti-Zionist stance, without necessarily having to align politically. And I think that this is more of a question posed rather than any kind of a definitive analysis of the situation, because the experience in Lebanon is slightly different than in other places, especially in light of the current political atmosphere. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Nadine. And that's important too, as we see the overlaps between our different experiences and across our homelands, to also attend to the nuances and differences between our communities and within our communities. Something to keep in mind as we move forward in this conversation. Oh, finally, we have Mervit, who will be talking about the Druze in diaspora.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here, and for our wonderful translators and my co-panelists. I'm going to try to keep this short because I want to get to our roundtable and Q&A, hear what you guys have to say. I think one thing I've noticed specifically in the realm of liberation and advocacy spaces that I'm in for Druze in diaspora is how, as an archetype, our people have engaged in a survival strategy behavior where historically we keep our heads down, we assimilate, we blend in, and, you know, this has kept us safe for generations. And I think now, especially in the diaspora, Druze are starting to push that boundary a little. And there's this growing need to reclaim our stories, which has been done through grounding us in collective care, especially if you're in this liberation work, and in advocacy, and moving away from nationalism. And I think too, by reclaiming our stories, we're refusing narratives that have positioned us as neutral, invisible, or aligned with harmful ideologies, which has inspired us all to be here today. And it also means situating Druze identity with the broader regional struggle for liberation, and honoring the specifics of our history as well as our lived realities, which is taking us a lot of memory that Natalie has mentioned, you know, remembering things and engaging in these oral storytellings, which is very underutilized right now. And reclamation also is beginning by, or can begin by, returning to the wisdom that has already existed within our communities. And like I said, more and more people in our communities are starting to challenge these inherited binary dogmatic ways of practicing our culture and our faith, one that steps away from exceptionalism. And as we continue to exist in these interconnected spaces, our perspectives have started to expand, and we're being exposed and affected by the suffering of our neighboring communities, which is pushing us beyond this ancestral comfort that once felt protective to one that is more vulnerable and more risky. But at the same time, many people who don't know us are perceiving us as one thing based on these harmful ideologies, which have taken over the narrative. And as a result, we're finding ourselves isolated. At least for myself, that's one thing that I've recognized, misunderstood in these liberation spaces that don't fully grasp who we are as a peoples. And we are also continuing then to distance ourselves from these safe spaces that once held us and shielded us. But it's very important that we continue to do so, that we can forge new spaces that include all our neighboring communities, not just our own. And as we continue to step into these spaces, it's really important that in this in-between, even though it's uncomfortable, that we continue to have these spaces where we can communicate with one another, host events and future talks, hopefully. And I think too, one thing I've noticed in diaspora is how we're challenging our own kin and our own communities, which has been very challenging on my end. But like I said, I think it requires this forging of spaces. And as we continue to have these talks, hopefully in the future, we can, you know, inspire collective liberation. And lastly, one question I'm left with, which hopefully we can address later on, is how our community members can continue to navigate Zionist and non-Zionist voices, Druze and non-Druze voices, who are generalized who we are and what we support. And then how do we reclaim our narratives in ways that foster repair, identity formation, belonging, as well as relational community care? especially as we navigate online and offline spaces, which hopefully, like I said, we can discuss later on. But I appreciate you all being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mervit, for being here and for sharing your beautiful words. I think that as you were speaking, I was reminding, so I'm teaching a course, it's my second time teaching a graduate seminar at Georgetown titled Trauma and Memory in the Transnational Arab World. And one of the things in which I constantly kind of underscore to my students, and I want to underscore here today, is the difference between history and memory. History as institutionalized, as official archives, as created by powers that be, often who's in authority, and that controls not only the ways in which people are represented, but sometimes the ways in which we remember ourselves, particularly when you're in diaspora and you have limited access to the homeland. Whereas the importance of our collective memory across our homelands, within and across our homelands, in the Levant and beyond, remains so integral, particularly to Druze and diaspora, those who not always have the privileges and opportunities to remain connected to the homeland, to go back to the homeland, to speak the language of the homeland, who often, in my research project, I talked to Druze peoples across the world, really. And this question that I always ask them, what does it mean to be Druze to you, comes with so many convoluted answers. And for those in diaspora, just utter confusion as to, well, what it means to be a Druze to me. I grew up in a Druze home. I know that this is my identity. I know that I was born into this. I can't convert out, or I can convert out, other people cannot convert in. And what is this? For so many people, the response is that I should marry another Druze person. That's their relationship to Druzeness, or their knowledge about Druze identity. And those types of limited knowledges and accesses are a problem. This perpetuates itself in the realm of academia. So I work within Druze studies as a relatively small but emerging field within Arab studies, Middle Eastern studies, but also very intersectional gender studies, trauma and memory studies, history, anthropology, social science, and the like. What does the landscape of Druze studies look like today? I just want to take a moment to show you all. And these are some charts and graphs that have been pulled and are available online from the University of Kansas, which has a Druze studies program, the first of its kind, really, and has also the Druze Studies Journal. Again, the first of its kind, the inaugural issue came out in 2024. But what these studies look like is important for us to take note of. Can somebody, one of the hosts, unmute and tell me if you can see this?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So right now, what we are looking at is number of articles and book chapters focusing on the Druze across time. And we can see before 1970, there was almost none. In the decade of 2010 to 2019, there was 73. There's already 15 in this decade, but of course, this decade is not complete. The country of focus, meaning the country that's being focused on within these studies, unbelievably and overwhelmingly, Israel is the majority of the country of focus across time. Syria, which has the largest Druze community and population in the world, has amongst the smallest number of studies emerging from Syria. So again, you see that disproportionality. Country affiliation of the lead author, again, Israel wins by far here. There are none from Syria. Israel is followed by Lebanon, and to some extent Syria, or the USA, and other countries to be noted. I can share the link for this webpage as well. And then percentage of articles and book chapters focusing on the Druze related to women, genetics, religion, with at least one Druze author. Again, for most of the history of the landscape of Druze studies, the people who were creating scholarship about the Druze were non-Druze. We see this slightly changing as we progress into later years and decades. But important to note there that though we are seeing more Druze authors, those authors are also mostly Druze from Israel, writing about the Druze in Israel. And just a quick reminder here, statistically, the Druze in Israel remain, 1.2% of the total population, but those remain representative of how our entire community, really, in terms of Druze academia and scholarship. So the importance of our narratives across disciplines, across geographical focuses, it cannot be overstated. So now I'd like to move into a roundtable part of this conversation where I'm going to pose some general questions to our incredible panelists. And please answer as you see fit or if you feel pulled to. And then after this roundtable, these kind of questions that I have planned out are going to open up to a broader Q&A. So I want to start by asking you all this kind of central question of how do we reclaim our stories in a way that aligns with the broader liberation of peoples in the region, including Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon? I know that's a heavy question, but what are the ways that you've thought about that or can see that happening?
I can go. I think that from our stance and within our community, I think that liberation alignment comes from rejecting our stance as a minority project. And what this entails is, what this entails now currently in this current time is action and organizing based on common memory relationships, eventually things that are more institutionalized. We all agree here that Druze history is entrenched in the struggle against settler colonialism in Palestine, against dictatorship and war economies in Syria, against sectarianism and clientelism systems in Lebanon, and foreign intervention everywhere. And I think that regardless of the previous narratives and differences and stances that have kind of tarnished our collective history, there is much to be built moving forward through this specific common thread. And this means that it's important to center what normally gets erased in these conversations. So Druze participation in Palestinian solidarity, anti-colonial struggles and anti-sectarian organizing in Lebanon, Syrian Druze civil activism and survival under repression and war, community organizing and efforts that have sustained a Druze diaspora, but also locally. So the reclaimed story should come in these formats in terms of what do we actually stand for? What are the common values and anchors that are aligned, right? So dignity, land, self-determination, anti-sectarianism, refusal to be used against other peoples, and basically solidarity as protection rather than isolation as protection, which has been the narrative as Maisan and Ebaa and Mervit in diaspora. Wherever you are, there is this narrative being breathed down our necks. Solidarity as protection, not isolation as protection, and kind of trying to reinstate that. Yeah, that's from my side.
بتواصل جدا مع اللي نادين حكته بس كمان بفكر
I really agree with what Nadine said, but I also say that at the end of the day we should look at things
حريات يعني بتتجزأش حسب المنطقة وحسب
thinking that freedom cannot be fragmented according to the region and the controlling power, and according to those who are called the vulnerable or the weak or the oppressed from one side. And from the other side, I really hate generalization in all its aspects. So we should beware of generalization. With time, and specifically after the Sweda events, I started to notice how easy it is to get drifted behind generalization only because an individual act, and unfortunately this only happens because of the negative aspects and never because of the positive aspects, and never has this happened. For example, of course I'm here, I'm talking about the Druze, but it can also be thought in other contexts. So we should pay attention to the absent narrative, but we should also pay attention to the repeated practices by the occupation. And there's something very similar that is happening. There is something similar to what happened to the Palestinian Druze happening with the Syrian Druze, you know. The Golan Heights, or the Golan, is the model for me that has not bent facing these practices until now and for decades now. And really, I see how much there are similar practices, and on the other hand, I see that how we, the people, are dealing with those practices and how our dealing with them is similar. That is, in addition to forced conscription, I think that the Palestinians have also let down the Druze. They let them alone to face, they have left them alone to face conscription. And today, I think that I even have to justify that I am a Palestinian sometimes. And to say that this history is not correct and there are different historical facts, and to say, for example, that if we look around us today at the Arab governments, and I think that they have normalized relations with Israel. Does this allow any person among us or any person in the world to actually generalize things on all the people? And the biggest example is the Palestinian Authority. The same thing is happening today in Syria. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, the protection has been requested from Israel even in 2018. Israel faced the Nusra combatants in Safad hospital, but nobody generalized that. I'm not saying that generalization is happening from one side, you know. Druze also do that a lot. I'm only talking from a personal point of view. But it's really annoying how much we are put in a position where we have to justify or explain. So now it is time, based on the freedoms that cannot be fragmented, it's time to look at at who writes the narrative and who's behind them in order to allow us to move in a fair way. I would like to add something. We should remember to speak about the narrative as it is, not in order to attract people. And we should think about working with the youngest generation first, because we are responsible for raising their awareness and educating them properly through music and songs, events. And the Golan Heights, they used to tell us, you are Syrians. And then we grew up as a generation until 2011 that is loyal to its Arab nationality, and who knows that the entity is the Zionist entity is its adversary or enemy. So, but after that, you know, there was space for confusion. So there were several parties who came to the Golan Heights and who would give us money to tell us that if I give you money, you will live better. So then it was easy to normalize things and forget our narratives. I think that we should provide good narratives through arts, etc.
Thank you for that. I also think it's so important that this idea that Nadine so beautifully said, solidarity is protection, and then Maisan brings in the point, like these 2 points of being Druze and being Palestinian are seen as antithetical. This is like isolationism in its practice, like in its fruition. We've isolated so much and been co-opted so much that the idea of a Palestinian Druze is like inconceivable to the mind for Druze people as well. And this, like, the solidarity as protection rather than isolation as protection. I also want us, and this is to my Druze community now, to really question what being in solidarity means at this time. I often hear amongst our Druze brethren this idea of hafiz al-ikhwan. Okay, we focus on our brethren, we are connected to one another. Part of, I think, being in solidarity and community and care is calling each other out, is challenging each other to think and do better. Not to romanticize any idea of because you're Druze and I'm Druze, we're together and we have a blood contract or a soul contract, and this is just how we exist. And whatever you do, I'll stand by it and be quiet. And because you're Druze, like that is not solidarity in its practice. That's not care. This is actually effectively harming our community as we see in these narratives today and leading to our marginalization and our erasure. And I think that's an important point to be made of here as I was thinking about this talk of solidarity and how it often gets romanticized in our community, but is also, as Nadine says, I think the cure of what we need. So who are we in solidarity with? How do we practice solidarity with each other and with others to best help our community, our homelands, our regions? And Mervit, of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Like, there's so many ways that we can reclaim our stories. I thought of like oral history and storytelling, faith and land-based practices. But like I bet said, like art is such an underutilized one. But also, like what you said in terms of communities challenging ourselves and bringing accountability into our Druze spaces, whether that be community events, cultural events, conventions. I know it's hard. Anytime that we're coming together and like you said, challenging this like Hafz al-Akhwan and how do we transcend just our own? How do we bring in our neighboring communities? Just this past summer, a fellow Druze sister and myself, who is also here today, we hosted a community event for both Swaida or for Swaida al-Ghazza in Lebanon. And we did get a little bit of pushback, but we noticed that it actually created a lot of dialogue where we could start to see the intersectionality of the struggles in the region. And there is no isolation and we're all together in this. So I think having more community events and organizing, like Nadine had said, is also going to help shift those narratives, more opportunities for us to have these uncomfortable conversations where, yes, we do get pushback. Like I know for myself, I'm getting a lot of pushback from my family because this is ways that they've been taught how to exist as a Druze person in the diaspora. So it is uncomfortable, but I think it's very necessary.
كمان شيء أخير بحب ضيفه.
I would like to add that we should restore terms. That is, for example, I belong to the Druze religion. We should also remind everyone that Druze is not a nationalism, you know. But then to go and start a war in the name of the Druze, no. Yes, I always think about the importance of the language that is being used.
So it's also true in thinking about the ways in which we are isolated from one another, and not only in terms of geographical distance, but in terms of language. So and I think art is one of the most beautiful ways that you build and transcend language and speak to communities, large communities within us and beyond us. And thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience. I so look forward to next steps and all of us continuing to forge community, continue this conversation, share information with one another, build solidarity within and beyond. So thank you so much. We'll see you next time, inshallah.